Hi everyone, I hope you had a great break. I'm sorry that we couldn't have the time to do a second networking session, but super excited for our last session for today. We're going to be talking with a whistleblower, specifically Erika Cheung, who landed a role back at Theranos, a consumer health technology startup, which was started by infamous Elizabeth Holmes, which was at its peak worth $9 billion. And she saw this really as an opportunity to be of service to the community she cared and loved. And so the young chemist thought she would be helping Theranos develop a revolutionary blood testing kit. But 7 months into her role at Theranos, Erika felt that something was a little bit off. And with the products that Theranos was building and with the values of the founder, Elizabeth Holmes. And so as a lab associate, Erika had realized that as revolutionary as Theranos' technology claimed to be, it had a lot of defects and simply didn't work. So it posed a lot of risk to the lives of patients. Yet, despite repeatedly raising her concerns to the top management, Erika's words fell on deaf ears. And that was when she quit and blew the whistle on Theranos' ethical misconduct. And so now Erika leads Ethics in Entrepreneurship, a non-for-profit that enables investors and entrepreneurs to better recognize ethical issues within their companies. And so today we will have this session be moderated by Grace Xiao. She is a former CNBC reporter and she's the head of global SoGal Hong Kong chapter. As Erika shares her stories and insights on speaking up about the type of culture and whistleblower policies and ethical decisions made in the tech industry. So I will now invite Grace and Erika onto the stage.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hey guys. We on? We live?
We are live and now. Yes.
Live. There we go.
All right. Great. All right. Thank you so much for the intro, Lily. As Lily mentioned, I was formerly a reporter, a journalist, and now providing communications, content strategy for tech companies and VCs. Really, really excited to have Erika Cheung with us today. I first learned about Erika's stories through the book Bad Blood, and it's a great book, well done by a Wall Street Journal reporter. Erika, as Lily just mentioned, was with Theranos for about 7 months before she blew the whistle. Since then, she's really been putting all her work into promoting ethical practice in the tech sector. She's went on to found and be the executive director of Ethics in Entrepreneurship, a nonprofit that is committed to fostering ethical culture and systems in the startup ecosystem. I know before that, Erika spent a bit of time in Hong Kong as well, and I've actually crossed paths, met some of our mutual acquaintances, heard a lot about you. I'm really excited to meet you online today. So I'm just going to give a bit more background on Theranos in case anyone doesn't know about the full story. So the whole claim was that this company could actually run a series of different kind of medical diagnostics with a single drop of blood. And you can imagine how crazy and revolutionary that sounded at the time. And it wasn't until 2015 that journalists, industry experts, regulatory bodies started kind of questioning how legitimate this whole thing is. And soon after, the company was exposed to be a fraud. So fast forward, the company's been liquidated and obviously shut down. Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani are now indicted for wire fraud and a number of other criminal charges. So obviously the company doesn't exist anymore. Erika, do you have anything else to add to your involvement with Theranos and how it kind of shaped you who you are now as a professional in this space?
Yeah, I think one important thing about this story is now we're kind of looking at it as a sort of post-mortem of something that went horribly wrong. But I think the reason why it's an interesting cautionary tale is because it was one of the most popular companies in the Silicon Valley. Everyone thought that this was going to be one of the top unicorn companies coming out of the Valley. And it was in the heyday of where everyone on the world wanted to work in the Silicon Valley, to be a part of this big sort of like tech boom that was occurring with all these new internet startups. So even though we've seen sort of the downfall of it, I think we all have to understand during that time that it was this, and often touted as being, you know, one of the major tech companies. So it's been interesting to me coming from a position where I thought I was entering into an organization that on the surface was so picturesque and beautiful and idealistic and so celebrated in certain ways, and seeing how even if something is marketed in a way that seems so good, too good in this case to be true, how really because of the decisions that they decided to make while running the organization, that their stated values didn't actually align with what the actions what was happening within the organization. And I think for me, this lesson of what you see on the surface can be very different than what is actually put into practice on a daily basis, and to be very cognizant of that shaped me as a professional to really pay attention to what people's actions are, the things that they say.
Why do you think, you just mentioned it was this huge kind of legendary unicorn that came out, and it was like the kind of trophy child industry at that time. Why do you think so many high profile people, from politicians to investors to, people in the tech industry, just really bought into it, even though logically we might even all question, how can one drop of blood like give you so much, right?
Yeah, I think there are lots of things that were really appealing about Theranos, right? The mission was really strong. The fact that you had this new technology that was going to make healthcare more affordable, more accessible, open the doors to so many more technologies of having more preventative, personalized medicine occur within the healthcare industry. And that was very compelling. And it was sort of transforming, going to the hospital and getting this big scary needle stuck into your arm to having it something very simple and easy to use by having a finger stick. So that was the mission. There was the product, right? It made this really complicated lab infrastructure that all of us are at least experiencing in the United States now, and understanding how complicated the lab testing can be, even for one test. Right, like with COVID and what everything that's going on, how complicated getting a COVID test can be. Maybe if we could simplify this really layered infrastructure of testing into a single unit, how compelling that would be. I think that Elizabeth was a founder that everyone wanted to see succeed. She was a sort of redemption story for female founders. She had a lot of charisma in terms of really being able to tell a story that all appealed to people's like very visceral desire for a healthier life and everything else. And also, a lot of people at that time were making a lot of money. So everyone was really scared of not necessarily losing out on $10 million, but they were scared of losing out on the next Amazon or the next Facebook. And so everyone wanted to bandwagon on this and bandwagon on it quickly so they wouldn't miss the opportunity to potentially make what was anticipated to be a very good investment.
And I know for you, the fear was very different. I think in previous TED Talks you've had, you talk about, you as a very young woman in this kind of environment, you were very scared to speak up. You were not sure whether you should speak up or not. So what made you, in the end, really, blow that whistle? And like you mentioned before, whistleblowing should be the last resort. What are actions you did before whistleblowing, and what are actions you would recommend people to do if they face the same kind of dilemma and situation?
Right. So when I worked for Theranos, this was my very first job out of college, out of undergraduate. So you have to understand, going into a situation where you're at the lowest of the totem pole and you've never had any work experience before, everything that you see, you're always going to come at it with a level of self-doubt. You know, I am surrounded by smart people. When I was working at Theranos, I was surrounded by people who had, you know, decades of experience above me. They had PhDs, they were MDs, they were very qualified. And it was very hard for me to see what was going on, like cherry picking data or the machine not working, and always think like, oh, well, I'm right and they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about, because everyone was kind of still going along with developing the product and distributing the product and testing on patients with this product that was shown to be so faulty. So I think it was very difficult for me to discern while I was working in the organization, you know, how much of this is, am I right? Am I right about the errors that were happening? And really, I didn't want to be right, because we were testing on patients with faulty technology and giving them potentially dangerous information, false information about their health status. So this could mean I could tell someone that they don't have HIV when they do. And that can mean the difference of them not receiving antiviral drugs soon enough to where that could lead them to dying sooner and having less life to live. That's the consequences of giving patients this type of information. So when I spoke out, you know, I did it very gradiently. I tried to talk, of course, to my managers, no response. I tried to like level it up internally within the organization, between lab directors, middle level management, the COO of the company, the board of directors, and was just constantly getting, you don't know what you're talking about, this is okay, or kind of shrugs, this is just the way things are here, going on here. And that's what sort of then led me to go externally and report to the media and also to regulators, to have regulators go in and conduct an external investigation to be able to determine, you know, was I right or was I wrong? And could they stop Theranos basically from continuously processing patient samples or not, because they found deficiencies in the lab. You know, there was so much fear mongering going on in the organization, where they were constantly reminding me that if I said anything, I signed an NDA and they would pursue legal action. So this, of course, creates that kind of pressure cooker of, Erika, you better be right, because if you're not, there's going to be costs associated with this. But again, every step of the way of my decisions, though they were very hard and very difficult, I was compelled to do it and to keep pushing the story forward, because at the end of the day, I joined this company because I wanted to help patients. And I went into the healthcare industry because I wanted to help people. And the fact that working for, you know, standing by what Theranos was doing was directly violating that principle of essentially directly causing harm potentially to patients. And for me, that was enough to sort of carry me through this sort of difficult circumstance of speaking up, because that was one of the main drivers of why I was working in this industry, why I decided to work for this particular company. And so it made it a bit easier for me to make the decision to speak up to the people that I did.
You must have been under tremendous pressure, and I can't believe, like, you know, I can't imagine doing that myself. And did any of your colleagues in the end, you know, reach out to you after they knew what you did you did the right thing, you know? So did any of them who initially said no, or like, you know, Erika, don't report on this, reach out to you later on and showed support?
Yeah, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. I had lots of allies. So I had lots of allies when I worked in the organization, and I had allies when I left the organization. And There was another whistleblower. There's Tyler Schultz. There was actually a small collective of people who had come forward in different ways, either to the media or mostly to the media, to kind of also kind of add supporting evidence to the claims that were being made. So that was very helpful to have a small community of us that did sort of push forward getting the truth out there, and finding other people who shared the same concerns that I did, even though I didn't know quite who they were. So that was helpful. There have been a lot of other people who sort of come forward and said, thank you for doing this. It was very hard for some people to do what I did because they had families, they had kids to support, they had so much more at stake in a certain way than I did. They had reputations that they needed to uphold. They had, goals that they were scared of losing. The same position that I was. There was, even though my first job out of college, there was some level of freedom there because I still had the rest of my career ahead of me, and I didn't have kids and other obligations that I was able to kind of lead a little more fearlessly, I think, than other people who have been in the same position.
Let's bring it back to the present. I know you've done so much since you left Theranos as well, and since you've gone on to advocate for ethical practices in the tech and entrepreneurship circle. What is the mission and goal of your foundation, Ethics in Entrepreneurship now? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so ethics and entrepreneurship, essentially what we're trying to do is foster ethical culture, ethical systems, ethical practices within startup ecosystems around the world. And what we're trying to do is really take this multi-stakeholder approach to doing that, really examining the different key figures who exist in the startup ecosystem, founders, workers, and investors, and figure out collectively with their different perspectives and interests that they hold, how do we sort of shift the culture within the startup ecosystem to produce more better decision making and ethical outcomes. So that's the core mission of the organization as it stands right now.
And can you give us a case study, kind of, or an example of how you help with how you help them in figuring out the best kind of ethical practices?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different things that we're doing. So we're launching our inaugural programs right now. So one of the things, the first part of it is what are the commitments that you're making? What are the principles that you stand by, and what are the commitments that you're going to make to say, these are the things that are important to me. These are the things that I think are important for other people, and these are the things that are important for the society in which we exist in, and how am I going to stand by those principles and stand by those commitments and understand and prime my mind to know that, regardless of the cost, I'm going to, on a daily basis, commit to these values that I hold, right? So really giving founders and workers and just generally people the opportunity to really assess that in their minds. Why are they doing what they're doing? What is important to them? What are some non-negotiables of things that they are not going to cross, regardless of the environments that they're placed into? And also, what are the standards that we should strive for ourselves and for the organizations that we build? So this is really getting this analysis of what this is and helping people work through those processes and to develop that mindset around, do you understand what your own values are, what your own principles that you operate are, is one of them, and what are those commitments? Then we work a lot on how do you ensure that those commitments that you're made, that you have systems of governance to be able to provide checks and balances for yourself to make sure that that's actually embedded in your organizational operations. If you say transparency is something that's important to you, is that occurring when you're fundraising? Is that occurring in your methodology in generating revenue, and in the way that you design your product and people interact with your products, and how do you create that system of checks and balances for yourself and are essentially held accountable to those principles. And then the third part is, how do we get the right people into your organization to be able to assess that? So we're developing a interesting ethics mentorship platform, so kind of go in and be able to book out people who are ethics officers or lawyers or academics who are able to consult your company in the bite-sized way in which startups are mostly accustomed to get the right expertise and advice as they kind of go through building their company. So those are some key inaugural programs that we're working on at the moment.
Those are really, really like valuable and like necessary kind of tools and, values to instill in them. I'm really glad you're kind of facilitating that. So in terms of, you did say there are certain values and principles that, leaders and founders need to uphold and, check themselves. What are some values and, qualities you think are vital for leaders to have and hold true to themselves when they're trying to balance a fast growing company and like their technological or scientific kind of ambitions?
Yeah, so some of the principles and standards. So when we were developing EIA, one thing that we wanted to make sure is that we gave people the opportunity to really generate those principles for themselves and what their values are for each of those organizations, and really get them to, again, make those commitments to the things that they say. And that I was listening to the last talk. Where are your receipts? Where's the proof that when you say you are committed to, in the case of what they were talking about, diversity and inclusion, do you have the proof to show that this is something that you've embedded within your organization? I think the thing when we principles around ethics, they tend to be these things that are self-transcendent in a way. Are you paying attention to stakeholders, right? Are you making sure that you have transparency within your organization? Are you acting with integrity and making sure that you say with what you do, and are you able to foster trust amongst your organization and the people who work for you, and then externally in the outside world? So these are some of the key things that we're kind of looking at. And what was the second half of the question? Sorry.
Kind of like, how do you
distracted.
Balance the fast growth and like the ambition for that, and just kind of checking themselves to make sure that they're not, jeopardizing or, compromising anything in terms of quality of scientific research or, technological kind of advancements and such.
Yeah, I think it leads to this idea of, right, do you know what you're committed to, right? Have you really assessed what your values and your principles are when you start your organization? And do you understand and conduct a sort of almost like a pre-mortem with yourself of saying, it is hard, when it is difficult, what are certain things that I'm committed to doing and lines that I won't cross, right? What are my negotiables of what I won't do? Because startups are hard, they're fast-paced and everything else. And so being very clear about what your standards are from the very really crucial and really important. And then are you conscious of when you set these commitments, how does that kind of flow out into your daily behavior? And how do you make sure that you create systems of checks and balances for yourself? Do your employees have a voice within your organization to say, hey, you're telling me we're committed to this, I'm not seeing this on the floor? Are your board able to keep you accountable to the things that you say, and they're going to step in and actually call out if they see something that's not in alignment with itself? Do you have strong systems for yourself as a founder that you can push back on people who are trying to make you veer in a direction that could violate one of your very basic principles. You're telling you, you know what, you need to push out this product as fast as possible when you know it is going to hurt your customers. And have you started to safeguard yourself again and put that system of checks with yourself to say, how am I going to resolve that conversation? How am I going to turn the conversation around and let that investor know that we are going to get you your return on an investment, but not at this cost, not at the cost of harming other people, right? So being conscious about, okay, I've made these commitments. How do I create that system of checks and balances for myself? And then how do I bring in the right expertise, right, to make sure that I'm making up for any blind spots that I might have.
And for employees, for those who are noticing maybe behaviors that might not, be the right, most ethical way of doing it, and are worried about the company's practices, what tips do you have for them? I think we can end our session here and then go to Q&A.
Yeah. So an employee always has to think about it in two different ways, right? There are the internal controls and the external controls. What can I do? And this is the best possible way. What can I do internally within the company in order to sort of change the course of what's going on? Who are the people that I need to talk to? What is the evidence that I need to collect to sort of make my case? This is probably the number one thing that is so important, is to collect objective evidence of whatever case that you are trying to make. And then who are the decision makers that are really going to be able to move this into a direction that prevents it from kind of violating or from encouraging or pushing things in an unethical direction. So those are the things that you kind of need to pay attention to, and the principle. You're able to speak to your management at the very least. You're able to speak to your executive talent, your HR department, or your board of your organization, or investors. Those are another one. And that's how you can kind of utilize internal controls. Again, whistleblowing is a very tough process. It doesn't always fare for a lot of people, so you have to really think about it strategically when you do it. But if you do see an organization that is doing unethical things, look for protective institutions and regulators that might be able to assess what is in many cases, crime being committed by a particular company. The media is another source. And also just campaigning, right? Talking to local officials and leaders to say that this organization needs to be held accountable for the wrongdoing that they're doing against people or the environment.
You really put yourself and put your name on the line and really fought for what you believe is right. One of our viewers here, Fernanda, actually is asking, do you think that in the process, if you had a technological tool that allowed you to complain anonymously, do you think that would have given you a different kind of response, or would you have had the same echo?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. So back in that time, you had Glassdoor. You had Glassdoor where people were able to kind of report on if they had some sort of grievance with the company, why they had it, why there were problems. But Theranos, frankly, was able to go up to Glassdoor and said, this violates our company policies and the NDAs that our employees signed, so take it off. And they were taking it off.
That's so crazy.
So, yeah, so as long as that, whatever this anonymous reporting tool also doesn't have strong conflicts of interest in terms of if they're being paid by the company, then it's tough. Also, I think the reporting anonymously is important, but it's also the system surrounding the reporting that's really important. Does this person and this individual, when they report, have access to the right legal expertise, to the right domain expertise, to the support network that they'll need once they go through this process. So I think, it kind of has to not only be the reporting, but how far does that reporting go, and how do you make sure you protect the individual who is reporting? So those were some things that I would pay attention to if you were interested in creating kind of like an ethics hotline or a tip hotline that was anonymous. Because another issue too with the anonymous hotlines is, how is it validated, right? Like how do I know this is someone being truthful versus someone who's just trying to defame or discredit or create some sort of rumor mill? And so that's always the complication with those anonymous reporting lines that you think of.
It's like when I was a journalist, so if you have a source, as much as you want to protect the source, you have to verify 100% that the source is reliable and credible, or else this is someone's life, someone's career, that you're taking down, and you can't just take anything you get from the internet, or even if it's a anonymous source, you have to know exactly why they want to be anonymous, what is the risk to their own life or their own career if they came out and came forward with it. So I totally relate to what you were just saying. So our next question says, this goes back to Theranos. Erika, this question is from Max. Hey, Erika, do you think at some level Elizabeth really believed that the product worked and did what it claimed? Or do you think she knew it was fraudulent? Surely she understood it would eventually all come crashing down. First of all, Max, you should read the book, Bad Blood. It's very good. Explains everything. But Erika, you take the question.
Yeah, so I think, you can believe whatever you want at the end of the day, right? We can all convince ourselves. Well, some people can convince themselves of whatever they want, but I think the fundamental thing is when you are a founder and when you are a leader of the company, you are held to the obligations of the claims that you make, particularly when you make them to investors, and particularly when you sell whatever claims you make to other people and take their money for it. You kind of have to be held accountable to the things that you say. I think that I don't think that she believed it would come crashing down. I think that she really believed that she was going to be able to essentially lie for a period of time and would just hope for the best, that things would kind of continuously work out for her as they largely did for 15 years, that she was able to sort of make a big claim that she would be able to build this device that would have all this functionality, but she just needed a little bit more money to do it, just a little bit more money to do it, just a little bit more time, a little bit more money. So I think that she was under the impression that potentially that could happen for a long time. Again, it's one of these things that I won't know. Whether she really, this will be Elizabeth Holmes can really attest to and claim to, because in terms of, did some people ask the question, was it ever going to work? No, not with what we had, not with what we had. The tech was not there at all, not in terms of creating one box to do all your blood diagnostics with one tiny drop of blood. That was not feasible for a very, 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 very long time, and probably a whole new company that would maybe scratch the surface of that problem.
Yeah, and as we previously even touched on, she just had so many big names backing her. She must have felt invincible in that sense, where Bill Clinton's publicly just announcing how great her, how wonderful she is. You had these crazy big names just backing her. And we've seen recently in so many kind of high profile cases where people kind of think they're protected because they just know powerful people. And these powerful people won't want to come out and even maybe ruin their own face. I know they might not want to admit their own defeat. And this is something you talked about with your friend Tyler's grandfather, right? He didn't want to come out and say, no, my investment was a wrong investment. Anyway, let's go on. We're tight on time. We have 5 more minutes. We have 2 more questions. So let's keep the answers slightly shorter now. So from Charles, do you see a shift in the startup scene due to recent scrutiny? For example, Facebook Does the idea of move fast and break things, fake it till you make it in startups still hold, or has that culture kind of shifted?
Yeah, I think you are starting to see a shift, right? You're starting to definitely see a shift where there are a lot of people that are much more skeptical of startups because of all the scandals that have sort of come to the forefront of everything from Uber to Ubiome to Zenefits. There have been so many. What was that Wirecard that just blew up recently? Even in Asia, you had issues with what was it, DGI and tons of companies, tons of companies. So you're definitely seeing a shift, right? You're seeing a shift amongst the workers. You're seeing shift amongst students that are no longer are seeing tech startups basically like working for a big financial institution or a bank, that it's like, oh, what we once thought like working for a startup was our opportunity to make an impact and change the world. Actually, no, that's not happening at all. They're all leading the way in certain ways to some really major societal problems and issues and disparities. So yeah, you're definitely seeing a shift with students sort of coming to and maybe deciding not to work in the technology industry anymore like they once would have. You see current workers of organizations and who have worked in tech for a long time really saying like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do anymore, right? Like this is so fundamentally against what I thought I signed up for. And you're seeing a little bit of a shift in the investment community as well, where they're realizing that it matters to them who and what they invest in, and that there is some level of obligation in their mind to invest in good people and things that at least don't harm society and harm other people. A little bit, I wouldn't say it's really moved the needle, but yeah, in terms of the idea of move fast, break things, I mean, for if you're building a workflow management system, move fast, break things is really the sort of lean startup idea, right? Where you just put something out there, it's kind of janky. Hopefully it has like enough functionality that people can interact with it, and basically with people getting upset or people actually using certain things, you can kind of formulate the product and push it in a direction where you build things that people want. That's pretty useful, right? That's a good way to kind of build things that you'll get high levels of adoptions to. But when it particularly is tech that is moving into highly regulated industries, this is really dangerous, right? You move fast and build this half-baked product to inform people, to give someone a vaccine, like that's crazy, right? You don't do this kind of stuff where you destroy potentially people's financial lives and their retirement funds and the ways in which they're able to access and send money to their loved ones. So I think, does it hold up? Does lean startup hold up in certain contexts? And does that methodology work? Yes, but does it work all the time? No. Are we starting to realize that we need to start asking ourselves really big questions around, what are the implications of the things that I'm building, and how do I safeguard and put in situations where I stop things from turning into worst case scenario is becoming more of a relevant question than ever before. So I think people are definitely thinking more about this for sure. And yeah, fake it till you make it. There's a lot of backlash on this, of course. There's a lot of backlash on it. And people are realizing that insincerity in like fake altruism is almost more awful than just saying to people that I'm in this to make a lot of money and I'm going to do that, whether you like it or not. There's something about saying, oh, I'm basically doing this to change the world, and actually you're only doing it to make a lot of money, there's something that people are much more unsettled with, I think. And so you're seeing a lot of people just very kind of rejecting those that are kind of putting on a show to basically build their companies at this point.
Yeah, I think definitely, you know, consumers nowadays are just a lot more sophisticated, kind of identifying that as well, just with the amount of information we have accessible to us so easily compared to maybe a generation ago. So definitely, like what you said, I think, yeah, we're definitely seeing that companies get a lot of backlash when they're, you know, ingenuine, whereas, you know, companies like oil companies are just like, yeah, well, I'm an oil company, I'm not here to save the environment, or I'm just here to make money. They're like, no one's gonna, you know, it is what it is, right? Like, anyway, we have very little time. We do have one more question. Really want you to answer this as well. It's Jess asked, do you think the inequalities of the justice system contribute to most startups to get away with what is essentially securities fraud? I wish Jess could actually elaborate more about what kind of inequality. Yeah.
I'm wondering, I think, I don't know if this is topical, but I have noticed this in general. There seems to be something very strange in the way our justice system in the United States is set up. Because if you look at it, if I were to go into a shop and, you know, rob someone of $20, I would go away to prison for what, like 2 years, 3 years, depending if I had an arms or whatever. But you launch a startup and you get a bunch of people to invest in you. You have very little oversight in the ways in which you manage and distribute that money. And you could siphon, you know, in Theranos' case, $700 million of a company and, you know, do whatever you will with that money for however amount of time. And then at the end of it, if it all blows up, you're able to say, oops, I made a mistake. We tried. And there's no justice there. Like that it just blows my mind when you realize the disparity in which an individual crime of someone who tends to, in many cases, be a victim of circumstance and an unfortunate situation, you know, will receive these horrendous punishments for things, versus when you have a corporate entity that probably commits way grander crimes, is able to sort of get away scot-free. You can't help but look at those scenarios of someone stealing $5 in the most immediate ways in which they're punished, versus someone, you know, has a situation where they take millions and millions of dollars away from other people, and you know, maybe nothing happens. Whoops, right? That was, we tried. It's just very, I think it's very jarring for a lot of people to see. And yeah, so I hope that answered the question. I'm not too sure, but I think, yeah, you do realize that there's some sort of disconnect in the way that justice is served to different categories of people.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your insights today. It was a very insightful chat. I really appreciate having you on the panel with me and just having this fireside chat with you. We're going to pass it back to Lily to wrap this up. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you both of you, Erika, for sharing your story. I think it's just fascinating listening to your first-hand experience. And I know, you know, if you're working in such a, you know, big tech startup with so many people who you respect and view as, you know, your senior, and that feeling of doubting yourself when you know it's the right thing to do, but how can no one else be seeing what you're seeing, right? So I love the documentary, the book, and just really respect everything you're doing right now as well. And thank you so much, Grace, for moderating this really insightful discussion. Love the questions that you also presented. And thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Amazing. So I'm just going to pull up our last slide. To wrap up this session, I really hope that you enjoyed the session today. And before we wrap up, please leave us feedback via this feedback form. Takes 30 seconds. If you can just tell us if it works or not, just use your camera app and fill this out. So if you did take a screenshot or photo from today, just a reminder, please tag us at NewCampus HQ. Our account details are all the same throughout LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So please tag us. We'd love to see what you thought of the conference today. And last but not least, you can also head over to the booth. There's more information about what NewCampus is, what our membership is like, and find out what we're all about. So that's it for today. I know it was a really long session, 3 hours, but I hope you enjoyed it and gained a lot of insight out of these topics today. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.